Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say on behalf of the Real Estate and Facilities Management chapter team, we are so grateful for those of you that are participating today. We thought a lot about what was going to be the focus area for the next webinar. And so we looked at not only what we as individuals, find of interest, but, what we're hearing from the community at large. And the topic that kept coming back to all of us was the area of automation in the CRE world. And I'm so pleased to announce to everyone and introduce Chris Zlocki. Chris Zlocki is the head of innovation for Colliers International. And Chris is, I believe, a nearly 30-year industry veteran and thought leader on topics of innovation. And I really think that everyone's going to enjoy the presentation that Chris has for us today. So with that, Chris, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on the call today. Really excited to discuss this impactful topic that we're focused on, which is automation. And really, it's going to be something I think that's going to continue to drive the changes in real estate and facility in a step function or a very dramatic way. So as Michelle mentioned, I'm the head of innovation for our corporate solutions team. I'm based in Denver. And one of my areas of emphasis is trying to figure out how this is going to continue to impact our business and where we're going to see opportunities to leverage it on both the client side as well as within our own practice. So with that as an agenda, what I thought we'd do is start a little bit focused on context, really sort of what's happening today, not only in real estate and facilities, but in general business relative to a number of general shifts or dramatic shifts that we're starting to see happen that I think are going to impact the way we're going to manage our business. Then we're going to talk about examples and typologies of where automation is going to make a difference and some possible opportunities that are going to merge out of that where I think you can leverage some solutions. And then we'll dive into a Q&A session. So I'd like to keep that at the end of the session so we can get through the slides, hopefully open up some lines, and have a conversation about any of the content that we're discussing today. So, from a context standpoint, I love this quote by Henry Ford, which says, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I love this quote relative to innovation in the space of real estate and facilities because I think the things that we're seeing now in terms of building systems, analytics, operations, the point solutions as I call them, going in are only at the forefront of where we're going to see transformation occur in the next decade relative to automation and some of the improvements we're going to see through technology. So today what I'd like to do is give you what I call a pathway to innovation or pathway to automation and provide some context as to where we are relative to real estate and facilities tools and technology. So what I see emerging in general in real estate facilities is this new paradigm that I like to call the digital world. And I know others have coined different versions of it, but I think there are three major forces that are impacting the way we are going to manage and transact real estate. The first is people and work. As we all know, work's shifting, the way we procure, the way work is being done, the distributed nature of it, where and how we work is continuing to change rapidly, and I'll touch on this in the next slide with the workforce. Place, which is, where we're actually doing that work, the models for delivering that space is shifting rapidly and being aided by technology and automation. And then technology, clearly all the different point solutions, as I mentioned, that are coming in and all the different platforms to be able to improve, all the different platforms that are out there to be able to impact the way we're delivering real estate and managing is going to be a significant impact as well. The first thing I start with, which I think is remarkable from a context standpoint, is a majority of different industry experts, management consultants, academicians are really seeing this the notion of productivity continuing to double for the next 25 years. So just think how that relates back to the work that you're doing. Think about doing twice as much work as the work that you're doing today. And so in that new paradigm, if we're going to see this occur, the real enabler of that and where they see the impact is really focused on through automation and through technology to be able to push where we're positioned today and continue to see more efficiency, cost savings, improved utilization, more efficient energy usage within our buildings. So from I think a few key changes relative that sort of frame how technology is going to also be put in context relative to some other big business drivers is if we look at the workforce in the economy, we're seeing a major and dramatic shift that's going to occur over the next 3 to 5 years, with 40% of the workforce being impacted by this notion of the freelance economy. People finding power and independence and seeing their ability to not just work for one company, but leverage their skill set across multiple corporations and institutions to be able to support sort of what they want to achieve professionally. That clearly has been spurred by the consumer economy and companies like Uber or Airbnb to come in and really show that you can independently manage your own profession and create a difference. And I don't think that would have occurred without having the flexibility and the technology advancements with mobility and with having ease of all the different solutions at your fingertips. The second dramatic impact or contextual prediction is that a lot of, again, we're going to see a dramatic impact as to the amount of jobs or how employment and the workforce is going to be impacted as a result of automation coming in across a whole host of sectors. So the quote on the left, that 30 to 40% of work could be outsourced by automation, AI, robotics, is pretty much in line with a lot of industry predictions. And we're on this chart that was developed by USA Today, I really appreciated this, where they looked at sort of the wage per hour impact of where those changes are going to occur. And clearly the bigger circles illustrate that a majority of automation is going to take over what I think more repetitive jobs, manufacturing jobs, also paper-intensive type of work. So sectors like financial services or routine warehouse manufacturing could shift more from, having a stable workforce to one that now may be focused on robotics or automated solutions to help provide improve the business performance or the delivery of products and services. So I think just understanding that those different contextual points are important. The other piece of this is, playing on that last slide of who will be impacted. My approach with real estate and facilities is that the sky is not falling here. That everyone thinks that robots are going to take our jobs, but when you really look at who is going to be impacted, tying again back to the reference of the prior information, it's really going to be those that are on the right side of this McKinsey quarterly slide that I like to reference around sort of predictable work, processing, data collection. A lot of those types of intersections are going to happen and be automated to take it out of the realm of manual. The work that will not be as highly impacted will be professions focused on manipulation or have complexity involved, the creative class or creative intelligence, where we're designing and we're thinking about how to change different business processes or deliver different products and invent new products, as well as what the McKinsey calls the social intelligence space, which is those focused on public relations, management, psychologists, and CEOs. So when I look at where corporate real estate and integrated facility management lies, I think we're typically in this space, in the least susceptible space, which is, where McKinsey quotes, really managing others and applying expertise. So I think our goal as professionals is to try and figure out how do we leverage technology in order to improve our productivity and leverage the tools that are out there. I don't think they'll ever replace sort of the skill set and the management capabilities that we currently have in place. So where are we in this life cycle of automation and technology change? I like to use this framework that describes sort of phases of maturity when it comes to examining where we are in any life cycle relative to impacts in economies or as a result of change within a life cycle. The first phase, I think, in any sort of disruptive innovation really is those different products or services that come in and really take a new approach and a differentiated approach to solving common or existing problems. So that whole disruption phase, I think, is the first sort of the first keynote or the first place where we see an impact. Then I think after all the solutions are developed, we then look at integration. How do we start pulling these different types of solutions together to create new services? And then eventually out of that comes what I call a transformation phase, which are new sectors, new products, and new services. And so an example that I like to use is the digital transformation phase, where if you look at the last 20 years and what's been developed on the left, where we had point solutions coming in the digitization of many products and services, such as obviously telephones, photographs, videos, email, and especially music and multimedia. These were all set up as independent services that could take advantage of a digital environment. Then in about so that was maybe late 90s or mid-90s to mid-2000s. And then in the mid-2000s, we saw the invention of mobile devices that began to integrate all that functionality and in a singular device to be able to show where you can harness not all of these different things, not as singular solutions, but really as a way to manage your lifestyle or a way to communicate more effectively. So then really out of that, in the last recent 3 to 5 years or 5 to 10 years, as a result of increased mobility, increased access to data and information, by pulling a number of these different facets together, we started to see transformational industries emerge. Our transformation, the consumer economy, where we see recognizable brands like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb come into the marketplace as a result of this sort of lineage moving from the disruptive phase to the transformation phase. So if we look at some examples, what's emerged out of this whole all this technology advancement, the whole notion of fintech and that sector, which really is leveraging all new different solutions within the financial space. A lot of it's driven by companies like PayPal. It includes new banking solutions like Venmo, which are essentially a mobile banking solution, emerging cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So really as a result of technology, we've seen this whole new realm of new products and services evolve. As well as I mentioned Airbnb, this sector is changing business where they're taking on a whole industry. And Airbnb now is the largest hotel, has the most hotel rooms per night of any of the different players. And that happened within the last 3 years, or within a 3-year period, where they went from startup to really sort of dominating or being one of the leading choices when thinking about booking a hotel room. So some examples of where disruption comes in and where, how that's transitioned from technology to transformative industries. So what does that mean for corporate real estate facilities? Inc. magazine recently published 5 leading industries ripe for disruption, and real estate and facilities were right in the middle of it, of being selected as one of those 5 key industries ripe for disruption as a result of leveraging automation and technology. So when we look at where facilities and real estate, where will this disruption occur? I've identified for the purposes of the presentation, I think 5 different key areas where I think there's going to be an impact. In the purchasing and delivery of real estate and facilities, and we'll walk through some examples of this, the sales and finance of real estate and facilities, connected buildings, obviously IoT, Internet of Things, playing a huge impact, portfolio planning and occupancy, and then energy and sustainability are all going to have, I think, are all going to see transformation as we go through the next steps. So I love this slide. I'm a member of a group called CoreTech, which is a subgroup of a company called Realcomm, and just focused on technology and real estate and facilities. And when we look at the solutions today that are out there that affect corporate real estate and facility solutions, there are over 3,000 solutions today that are in the marketplace, ranging from corporate real estate, energy and sustainability, IT, human resources, obviously connected, smart buildings, and then financial solutions. So there's a lot of confusion. There's a ton. We're in that, as I call that, disruptive phase. We're in that place where there's a lot of different things going on and a lot of different opportunities that out there to be able to implement a solution to solve one of these different problems or one of these different opportunities within the subsectors or subject matter expert or service areas in any of our spaces. And then if I were to if we go back to the 3 phases that I outlined, where are we relative to the services that we deliver? And I would propose or argue that, again, going back to the last slide, where I'm seeing where we are today is I think we have a number of these different solutions that work independently but aren't necessarily getting to that sort of integration phase. We're not seeing a lot of crosstalk across all those solutions, except for a few areas where I think we're starting to see more progress around occupancy planning, energy management, strategic planning. And I guess what I'm wondering, going back to the Henry Ford slide, is what's sort of the Model T that's going to emerge out of this? And I think that's what's exciting, is that we're in this period now, and that really over the next 3 to 5 years, we might see the next horizon of a difference of how we radically sort of use this technology to transform the way we're delivering service. So diving into each one of the different sort of areas where I see an impact, the first one is in purchasing delivery. And so if we start looking at this area of automation, where we're starting to see traction is in the OnDemand Portal, or the ability to link supply and demand for space through a digital platform. A company like Liquid Space is connecting supply, demand, and service providers to source space with little human interaction through the portal. So you can go on and either post space as a property owner, and you're seeing companies like Brookfield and Marriott and WeWork go on and put space as availability, and have companies go in and say, hey, how can we leverage the space that exists from any one of the landlords or the end users or landlords or service providers that are offering that space up. And what's different about this is it creates flexibility as well from a licensing perspective and not a lease perspective, where you could, in some cases, rent a conference room for a day, or you could sign a license agreement for a space for 3 months. And think about this as an online booking system, or going on and having ease of access of where to go in and book the type of space that you need. One of the new concepts that they've come up, which I think is again, moving it to the next step of transformation and integration is this alt space concept, which they've developed, which is taking financing for fit out of space and Liquid Space actually developing that solution for options that are in their portfolio. So there's no capital investment up front. There's no lease signature. You're now licensing a space, which is treated differently for IFRS or the new FASB changes that are coming into effect. So essentially, it's like licensing any other cloud-based solution that they'll come in for. If you sign in a license agreement for a certain period of time, they'll fit that out. And what they're able to show is a 50% potential cost reduction over the life of a traditional lease than what they're through their model than what you'd typically see in the same period type of lease structure. We all have heard of WeWork. It's exploded over the last several years with a $20 billion plus valuation with on-demand and flexible space. I know that this doesn't fit the traditional sense of automation, but the ability, again, to take space on demand and leverage a co-working environment and create that flexibility and have access to the space really shifts the model from a traditional lease of X square feet per year to now X desks per month. So having more and more access to this flexibility, I think, fused with the portal design is really going to continue to shape how companies like WeWork and Liquid Space work together through that notion of integration in that model to be able to develop a more flexible, agile solution, which real estate has always struggled with, or companies have struggled with, is the notion of flexibility and having expansion and contraction as it scales with the business. The value equation for WeWork, as an example, if you were to look at this graph on the right, or an illustration of what a typical standard lease build-out is in a high-cost, high-volume market like New York City, because of their model and the way they look at a licensing seat model and more community space, less personal space, they're looking at potentially cutting the savings in the space by 25 to 50%. That's just part of the equation, though. What they're also providing is this notion of instant culture or curation of space so that you feel a bigger part of a community. Now, until recently, their model has been focused on smaller companies and startups, but now with enterprise solutions, we're seeing a lot of adoption by larger companies. Recently, you saw companies like Amazon and IBM take large blocks of space within WeWork locations. And so right now there's over 100,000 members are looking to double that in the next couple years in over 150 locations. So just from a buying standpoint, I think it's an interesting paradigm that fusing that with a technology solution just provides a lot of agility and flexibility. And similar to Liquid Space, they're also developing what they call WeOS, which is going in and custom fitting out and managing the whole development of a space for you and then curating it and managing it for you. So again, taking away the upfront capital expenditure, which is a pretty big deal, and providing the management and oversight of that space as well. So again, it's a new concept. They're just rolling that out, have a few examples where they're implementing it, but more to come in their ability to look at transformation. So let's look at something as common now as a typical brokerage transaction and how sort of automation can affect it. If you go from left to right and you think of the different phases of a transaction, and what's included, and you think of the little unisex people I put in this slide as being human interaction within any of the different phases, you really have human touch points, and it's a relationship-driven business as well as again, going back to an expertise-driven business. But you have currently, I think, a lot of touch points along that path where, an analyst looks at the portfolio, they talk about an option or an expiration of where their next steps are with leasing of a space. The next step then goes to have a conversation with what's the right brokerage team. How then they initiate a search. Do they stay in place? Do they look at other space? They go through a site selection process. Then they go through a business case approval, negotiate, sign the lease, fit it out, and then someone updates the database of that lease and through a lease administration system and how it's going to be tracked. If we were to think about even today, all the different independent systems that are out there, if we were to take some of the artificial intelligence-based solutions, it would automatically generate a project report where that automated database issues a project. The project is sent to an open portal that filters market opportunities and presents and narrows that search for you. That's one area that I think the whole industry is searching for, is more open source data and information, but I think that's going to start to evolve. Then you go through a location selection process. Then the business case becomes automated once you make that selection through online open source financial modeling tools and business case development tools. And then there's a digital approval and signature. Clearly, you got to fit out the space. And then AI and artificial intelligence and character scanning then has that information in a database. So it's just showing you, I think, where the touch points and where human interaction, we're still going to need clearly professionals to manage the process. Where that productivity comes is where we're going to see it be streamlined and less people focused on the critical touch points rather than some of the more manually driven parts of the process. So that essentially can happen today. It's just a question of, again, integrating all those different point solutions to be able to create that value chain. So shifting now to sales and finance, if we look at blockchain as being a key transformational, I think an industry that's emerging, and for those of you who don't know what blockchain is, it's the technology behind cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Essentially, think of blockchain as an open ledger where you can track the history and value of all prior transactions. So think of a time when you used to balance your checkbook manually, where you would have that ledger. Essentially, what this does is this will create that open ledger for the history of any asset or any building. That's where the opportunity lies. And so as a result of the implementation of this, we'll be able to gain more data. We'll be able to potentially eliminate the middlemen who aggregate that data, since it'll be put in an open source environment, and you'll have access to all that building data and information. We'll see fraud reduction as a result. You'll see a lot of, if it's securely entered and it's managed effectively, hopefully fraud will be reduced in terms of the management of the data and the information that's putting in. And then you'll see more efficient, streamlined contracts. So I think that there's a huge opportunity here with blockchain to be able to leverage that as a way to build that data source that I think was lacking from that previous slide. And when that happens, I think it'll provide more open access to data and information. Shifting now to the Internet of Things, IoT. Sorry about this slide. Something got garbled, I think, in the upload process. But essentially, think in the past, everyone's talking about IoT and connected buildings, but what's really amazing now is from your handheld device, you can control and manage all aspects of security, heating and cooling, energy management from one device. It's going to continue to be important with connected buildings and all the technology that exists to continue to advance sort of how those systems become connected to create a difference and be able to impact efficiency. One of the things that we're going to see is this continued rise of mobile devices and RFID devices and independent sensors. Because of, if we wouldn't have had more lightweight mobile infrastructure, IoT probably wouldn't exist. A lot of it's driven by cloud, but you also need the hardware to be able to support it. So if you look at the evolution of where we are today, and we're going to have sort of 5 to 6 times or 7 times the global population of mobile connected devices, and all those different systems talking to one another to be able to translate how efficiently or how effective a building's being managed or a system's being managed. One area where I think Microsoft's taken a lot of great strides to really several years ago to be able to start this advancement. In their campus in Redmond, they over 100 plus buildings, they've interconnected all the different fire and safety, security, lighting, energy, HVAC, everything, and into one integrated command center where they're gaining information about everything from air handling systems to HVAC, heating and cooling, cooling towers. And so as you're standing there, they're collecting something like 50 million points of data a day. So if an air handler's open, a red flag goes up and a work order is generated automatically. And so it goes from manually creating that work order to now it being approved to go out and get a technician to support it. Daryl Smith, who really was the mastermind behind all this and was at Microsoft, is now at Google, I thought made a very insightful comment at the time where smart buildings will become smart cities and smart cities will change everything. And I think, what he was alluding to is this notion of connecting the retail or the product and service area with the manufacturing and supply chain. So as you think about even in a retail environment, buying a pair of jeans or some commodity, that's automatically once you buy that, the point of sale, it goes back to the warehouse to fill the inventory. And if that doesn't exist simultaneously, it's going back to the production line. All that now is going to be interconnected. And I think we see companies like Amazon really making a push, clearly to be able to transform and change that model. And I think that's where we're going to continue to see sort of greater impacts in this area as we start to see more connections between supply chain manufacturing and then the products and services that our companies are working with. So now getting to portfolio and occupancy, some of the areas we're looking at, we're seeing advancements in is this notion of analytics and big data, being able to create interconnectedness, but also starting to integrate it into virtual assistants like Alexa or Siri, where you can collect your data sources and be able to go on and ask, when's my lease expiration in a particular location, or what's my daily spend? I think companies like Narrative Science and others that we're actually working with are actually providing us the capability to connect the dots between data and now, rather than visually going out and seeking the analytics, but actually speaking to them and asking questions and it telling you sort of the information you need real time. So I see tremendous sort of advancements going to see tremendous advancements in that space in the next 3 to 5 years. Virtual reality, I think, is going to come on the scene when it becomes more affordable, but imagine using it as a way to, if you can't visit every space, having that space sent to you, putting on that headset and really envisioning what the quality and character is. Or workplace innovation, what does this space look like? Is this the look and feel or the type of space I want to be in? So more to come in that arena as well. Artificial intelligence now being used to look at space utilization, so things such as Bluetooth and rather than more manual devices or badge reading, starting to see new technologies emerge that can track and manage the occupancy within a building or within space without having to have a lot of personal management tools or badges or systems that tie into the personal or into your personal experience. And then bots and automation. So moving to taking data and moving it to a mobile environment, really sort of sensing and responding and having mobile-friendly solutions. One of the things we're focused on, and I think a lot of the service providers are focused on, is getting away from proprietary solutions and providing centralized analytics. So what we're seeking to do with our platforms is integrate a whole host of different systems, such as ERP, lease administration, IWMS, CMMS technologies, and be able to provide all this data and information in one user-friendly environment through a dashboard environment that's also mobile-friendly. One example of where we've seen some impact is the ability for one client. We integrate 8 different systems through APIs, which are essentially the ability to integrate and link the connection points that connect different data sources into one normalized or one integrated solution. We were able to take 8 different sources and develop their total cost of occupancy on a global basis. This company's grown up through M&A and a whole different host of different acquisitions, and so very quickly we were able to illustrate where all their different cost centers are, create comparisons, and help them think about reducing their spend over time. I mentioned narrative sciences and artificial intelligence. We're also driving this, and we're going to see more of this across the industry, and predictive analytics to be able to take data and information and forecast with it effectively by looking at the trends of the data that had been collected and input into the databases that companies have been managed. So real time looking at, rather than developing manual PowerPoints, a program behind this solution as an example is actually telling us what the impact's going to be real time, either at a portfolio level of managing future spend or at a location level. It's going to tell us where the pinch points are and where we should be looking for areas of efficiency and improvement. And then integration of GIS mapping. Again, these big data sets, pulling in a whole host of different data that's becoming more accessible. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, FDIC, local economies driving data and information, I think is going to continue to expand and provide more dramatic ability to do site selection, more real-time information. So having that at a end user's fingertips and collaboration is going to be important as well. And then, this slide really sort of touches on the prior predictability, but gathering more market data and having more access to market data, be able to more effectively predict our future. I think real estate and facilities has struggled with that. I'm optimistic that because of open source capability like blockchain and more big data solutions coming into the marketplace, we're going to start to get a better handle on the future macroeconomic conditions within the different regions and locations we're working in. So I think that that's going to be an effective sort of impact as well. I'm going to skip over these couple in an interest of time, but just quickly note that another couple areas are in the notion of that we're seeing automation play a big difference is in the notion of workflow and functional alignment to space. So this a company that I think has a revolutionary platform called WPA is really looking at what I would call the organizational network or the social network analysis of how and where people are working, and then mapping that to the effectiveness of how they're occupying space. So you're going to see more of this type of automation come in, where we can see sort of how people are working and managing that data that's coming out of there, and illustrating how more effectively a space plan or an occupancy plan can be projected. Another company called Celonis, really doing process mining, so looking at sort of process flow of how you're developing an end-to-end solution, such as in a supply chain environment. Is it optimized based on the data that they're using? Leveraging a whole host of artificial intelligence and analytics to be algorithms to be able to predict how effectively and efficiently you're leveraging that space. It's now being able to illustrate with a click of a button where you take out process steps and where you can reduce redundancy or inefficiency within the overall process. So the last point, energy management and integration. If we look at where we are with building systems, historically buildings were more passive and at the end of the energy grid where, you really were collecting the supply. Demand wasn't the issue. It was just free flow and you were managing it at the intake point. Now with IoT and distributed generation and smart buildings, you're able to more effectively control how much of that energy flows in within the different systems. The challenge is still that a lot of the different systems, going back again to prior slides, is that a majority of the building systems are managed independently. You have a whole host of energy management, CMMS, IWMS, a lot of them working independently and maybe not optimized or speaking to one another to gain or drive efficiency. A lot of point-to-point solutions and potentially inefficiencies when looking at the scale. Again, very siloed. A company that I think has taken an innovative approach is called Uptake, a consultancy on energy management out of Chicago. They've developed a platform that really is starting to look at integrating all those different point solutions like BAS, lighting system security, CMMS, portfolio strategy, similar to some of the analytics that I showed you, and develop this analytics platform in a very simple, easy-to-use manner where you can find those efficiencies across those different systems. And some of the stats that they quote is 60% of FM managers predict IoT will impact maintenance policies, but only 34% of FMs report plans for adoption. So a lot of them see this, a lot of facility managers see this being impactful, but really don't have a plan of action to integrate or pull all that data into one place. And then really right now, 18% of FMs are using real-time information to really configure and optimize those energy solutions within their platforms. So I guess, I've been speaking nonstop and really trying to give you an overview as much information across these different areas. But in summary, I think currently there's so many different point-to-point solutions in this disruptive phase, and that's where I think we are in the context of real estate and facilities. I think the next phase is that this notion of integration of how all these different solutions come together to create more impactful, not more impactful, but find synergies to create impacts to the bottom line, to efficiency, to productivity, I think is going to be important. And then transformation, could be multiple years away of when we start to see how the integration of these different systems will continue to impact the way corporate real estate facilities are managed. I think some of the areas that we're going to see come together is this notion of the evolving on-demand people strategies, how the freelance economy and more independent contractors come in to blend with using portals for sourcing, and then more adoption of real-time analytics to really look at the cognitive learning or how you're learning on the spot to be more flexible and agile in your development. So that's 50 minutes. That's thank you for your time, and now I think we can open it up to questions if we can, if it makes sense to open up some of the lines for if there's anything I can clarify, re-review, or have a conversation about where others think we're going.
I'm a little bit reluctant to open up all the lines, but I would say that if anyone has a question, to just go ahead and put it in the chat, and we're looking at it now. am surprised that we're not getting any questions. I'll just,
Well, thank you for your time. If everyone doesn't have any questions, I appreciate again the time today, and I'll turn it back over to moderators, and if there's anything else you want to close with, you can take it from here.
We did just get one question in. How do you see CRM fitting into this phasing?
How do you see CRM phasing? That's a CRM. I think it's going to be focused more on where we're going to see more opportunity is what I would call the lead generation phase. Right now, CRM and customer relationship management tends to be more, you go out, build a relationship, you put it in a model, and then you manage the technology behind it and manage the business development relationship. I think we're going to see impacts on digital lead generation. Companies like Salesforce are really pioneering the opportunity to go out and find more targeted markets. So for IAOP and service providers, I think that there's a great opportunity to look at how you're developing products and services and figure out how some of that technology could be more advanced to go out and find more targeted leads without it being a manual, physical operation, but it could be done through a whole host of digital or target marketing through some of the new lead generation platforms that are evolving and being developed.
Thanks. All right, well, if no one has any more questions, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to the Real Estate and Facilities Management chapter for putting this together. These slides will be available in the Knowledge Center for IAOP members just following this webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.